In the dusk of a quiet autumn evening in 1914, the sprawling hills of San Jose, California, cradled the enigmatic silhouette of the Winchester Mystery House. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, while the setting sun cast long shadows that danced across the aged wooden facade of the mansion. Each window, a darkened eye, seemed to watch the world with a knowing gaze, whispering secrets of its own. High above, the sky blazed with hues of orange and purple, illuminating the intricate architecture that had taken decades to materialize, an edifice born from grief and a desperate need for solace. The sound of a distant hammer echoed through the stillness, a constant reminder of the builders who had toiled tirelessly, constructing and reconstructing, as if trying to appease the restless spirits that lingered within the walls. In the heart of the house, Sarah Winchester moved through the halls with a purposeful grace. Her presence was both commanding and ethereal, a woman shaped by tragedy. Born in 1866, she had inherited not only her late husband's fortune, but also the burden of countless losses. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company, a legacy entwined with the very fabric of American life, had brought her wealth. But it was the shadow of death that loomed heavier over her life, the loss of her infant daughter and later her husband. Each rifle produced had been a harbinger of death, and in their creation lay the specter of lives lost to violence. As Sarah entered the grand ballroom, the light from an array of crystal chandeliers refracted into a kaleidoscope of colors, casting a warm glow over the room. The walls, adorned with elaborate carvings and intricate tapestries, bore witness to her relentless pursuit of redemption. She had transformed the mansion into a labyrinthine sanctuary, a place where she believed she could appease the spirits of those slain by the very weapons her family had manufactured. Each room, a testament to her grief, was designed in a chaotic yet purposeful manner, with doors that led to nowhere and staircases that spiraled into emptiness. On that fateful evening, a gathering of local spiritualists had convened in the parlor, drawn by whispers of the supernatural that surrounded Mrs. Winchester. The air crackled with anticipation as they convened around a round table, candles flickering in the dim light. The atmosphere thickened with an electric tension, as if the very walls were listening, eager to reveal their secrets. Sarah, with her deep-set eyes reflecting both wisdom and sorrow, presided over the gathering, her hands steady as she guided the conversation toward the realm of the unseen. "Tonight, we seek to understand the burdens of those who have passed," she declared, her voice resonating with a quiet strength. "We honor their stories and give them voice once more." As the séance commenced, the room filled with an otherworldly energy, laughter and murmurs echoing softly through the hallways. Shadows flickered in the corners, and the spirits, it seemed, were eager to communicate. Yet beneath the surface of this gathering lay an undercurrent of tension, a palpable reminder that the past is never truly laid to rest. Outside, the wind howled, a mournful sound that echoed the grief of a woman haunted by the weight of her legacy. In that moment, Sarah Winchester stood as both architect and captive of her own creation, a solitary figure caught between the realms of the living and the dead. The Mystery House loomed larger than life, an eternal testament to the complexities of love, loss, and the unending quest for peace amid chaos. The sun hung low in the California sky, casting long shadows across the sprawling estate that stood on the outskirts of San Jose. The sound of hammering echoed through the air, punctuated by the occasional clatter of tools and the muted shuffling of workers. It was 1914, and the Winchester Mystery House was rapidly taking shape, its labyrinthine corridors and eccentric architecture a reflection of the woman who had commissioned its construction. Sarah Lockwood Pardee Winchester stood at the center of it all, an enigmatic figure draped in a long dark gown, her eyes shimmering with determination and a hint of sorrow. Born into privilege in New Haven, Connecticut, Sarah had been raised among the trappings of wealth, the daughter of William Wirt Winchester, a successful manufacturer of firearms. Her early life had been a tapestry of opportunity, woven with education and the comforts afforded by her family's fortune. Yet the specter of tragedy had cast a pall over her existence. The death of her infant daughter, followed closely by the passing of her husband, the famed gunmaker Oliver Winchester, had left her adrift in a sea of grief. In the years that followed, Sarah sought solace through the construction of her home, an endeavor that began as a refuge and evolved into an obsession. Each hammer strike resonated with her desire to ward off the spirits of those who had perished by the weapons produced by her husband's company. Legend had it that a medium had advised her to build continuously, lest the restless souls claim her as their own. Thus, the workmen labored tirelessly, day and night, under her watchful gaze. As twilight descended, the atmosphere shifted, the air grew thick with unease, and the shadows danced menacingly along the walls of the unfinished mansion. Sarah moved through the maze of timber and stone, her fingers brushing against the rough-hewn beams that formed the skeleton of her sanctuary. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her, and she turned to see the foreman, a burly man with a furrowed brow, approaching with hesitation. "Mrs. Winchester," he began, his voice low and cautious. "The plans for the West Wing. They may require a reconsideration." He fidgeted, his eyes darting to the ground, as if the earth itself might swallow him whole for uttering such words. Reconsideration? Sarah's tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of steel in her voice. "Do you doubt my vision?" "No, ma'am," he replied hastily, "but the layout you've proposed, it's unorthodox. The staircases lead to nowhere, doors open into walls. It's as if you want to confuse the very spirits you fear." A flicker of anger crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sadness. "Do you think I am afraid?" she asked, her voice steady, but laden with the weight of her losses. "I build to embrace the unknown, to defy the dark that has taken so much from me. Each corner turned and each door opened is a step toward my liberation." The foreman nodded, retreating slightly, sensing the fragile balance between her determination and despair. As he walked away, the distant sound of a crow cawing pierced the air, a reminder of the ever-present shadows of death that loomed over her life. But Sarah stood resolute, the flickering lanterns illuminating her path as she resolved to keep building, to keep searching for peace in the chaos of her own creation. Outside, as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, the mansion loomed larger against the darkening sky, a testament to one woman's struggle against the ghosts of her past. And within its walls, Sarah Winchester continued to weave her intricate web, one nail at a time, hoping to find solace in the very structure that mirrored her own fractured soul. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the rolling hills of California, Sarah Lockwood Winchester stood on the balcony of her sprawling estate, the Winchester Mystery House. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, a fragrant reminder of the life she once cherished. Yet, even as evening shadows extended their fingers across her garden, memories of her fateful union with William Wirt Winchester, sealed in 1881, stirred within her like a restless ghost. The day of their marriage had dawned clear and bright, a perfect tableau for the union of two souls destined for both love and tragedy. Sarah, adorned in a gown of ivory lace that flowed like a gentle stream, felt the weight of her family's legacy resting upon her shoulders. The ceremony, held at the Winchester family estate in New Haven, Connecticut, was both an occasion of joy and a subtle harbinger of sorrow. Tall and handsome, stood before her, his gentle brown eyes filled with warmth and promise. Their vows echoed through the hollowed halls, binding them together in a covenant of love and mutual ambition. But the cheers of their guests soon faded into a foreboding silence. The couple soon discovered that the riches inherited from William's father, the famed firearms magnate Oliver Winchester, came at a heavy price, a relentless cycle of loss that would haunt Sarah for decades. Within a short span, the couple faced the heart-wrenching death of their infant daughter, Annie, who succumbed to marasmus. This tragedy marked the beginning of a cascade of grief that enveloped Sarah, leading her to the edge of despair. In the years following their marriage, William's health began to decline. The once vibrant man, so full of ambition and zest, was struck down by tuberculosis, a cruel disease that gradually dimmed the spark in his eyes. As the sickness took hold, Sarah devoted herself to his care, sacrificing her own joy in the hope of preserving the warmth of their love. The sprawling estate soon began to mirror her turmoil, with the couple's dreams of a shared future crumbling like the walls that surrounded them. In the aftermath of William's death in 1881, a profound emptiness settled within Sarah's heart. The world outside continued to bustle with life, yet she felt trapped within the confines of her own sorrow, as if the very walls of the Winchester estate were closing in on her. The whispers of the townsfolk, laden with tales of the haunted and the cursed, reached her ears, each rumor a reflection of her own spiraling thoughts. They spoke of how she sought to commune with the spirits of the departed, her grief manifesting in a relentless construction of her home, a labyrinthine structure that would never find completion. As the years rolled forward, the estate became a puzzling testament to her obsession with the afterlife, and each hammering nail echoed with her desire to appease the restless souls, a ritual born from her anguish. The once celebrated love between Sarah and William transformed into a tale of sorrow. Woven into the very fabric of the house that bore her name, the laughter that once filled the halls had faded, replaced by a silence that lingered like a specter, reminding her of all that she had lost. And yet, within the dwelling's winding corridors and shifting walls, Sarah's spirit remained unbroken, a poignant reminder that even amidst the shadows of loss, the heart can forge a path through darkness, seeking solace in the echoes of love that never truly fades. The church bells in New Haven rang sweetly across the green hills, announcing the union of Sarah and William beneath a bright June sky in 1914. Draped in ivory silk, Sarah's gown shimmered in the sunlight, its delicate lace edges whispering of elegance and grace. As she walked down the aisle, her heart fluttered with a mix of joy and apprehension, the weight of tradition heavy upon her shoulders. William, the tall, handsome heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, awaited her at the altar, his expression a blend of pride and earnest devotion. Their vows, spoken amidst the fragrant blooms of peonies and daisies, echoed with promises of love and fidelity. While the gathered guests, friends, family, and prominent figures of the New Haven elite watched with rapt attention, the ceremony, steeped in the tradition of the time, reflected a world on the brink of change, where the American dream was taking shape, yet the specter of war loomed just beyond the horizon. In the months that followed, their lives blossomed as they settled into a grand home adorned with polished mahogany and shining brass. Laughter filled the halls, a gentle harmony echoing through the sun-drenched rooms as the couple prepared for the arrival of their first child. The nursery, painted a soft pastel blue, awaited the coos and cries of a newborn, its windows thrown open to catch the warm California breeze. But the tranquility was shattered when Annie was born, her fragile form scarcely filling the swaddling blankets that encased her. Sarah, filled with the joy of motherhood, found herself overwhelmed by a sense of foreboding that she could not shake. Each day passed with the routine of feedings and lullabies, yet Annie, so delicate and small, seemed to drift further from her grasp. The warmth of the sun turned cold in the shadows of worry that crept into Sarah's heart as she noted the pallor of her daughter's skin and the alarming weight loss that gnawed at her spirit. William, ever the strong and practical man, attributed their child's frailness to the trials of infancy, offering comfort through gentle reassurances as he navigated the demands of his growing business. He often returned late from the factory, his brow furrowed with the burdens of responsibility. The clang of machinery and the scent of gunmetal lingered on him, reminders of a world that thrived on production and progress, while within their home, life hung precariously by a thread. As weeks turned into a cruel blur, Annie's health deteriorated. The once vibrant nursery felt like a tomb, echoing with the silence that followed each whisper of hope. The doctors, with their grim expressions and futile prescriptions, offered little solace. Marasmus, they said, a slow starvation of the body, a wretched fate for a child so young. One fateful morning, as the sun rose with a muted glow, Sarah cradled Annie in her arms, the baby's breaths growing softer, fainter. The world outside continued its relentless pace, unaware of the tragedy that was unfurling within those walls. As Sarah rocked her child, tears streaming down her face, she felt the weight of her dreams crumbling. The loss was suffocating, a void that would forever alter the course of their lives. In that moment, the promise of a future filled with laughter and light flickered and dimmed, leaving only the aching silence that echoed through the halls of their once bustling home. The autumn sun hung low in the California sky, casting long shadows across the sprawling grounds of the Winchester estate. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves and carrying the scent of damp earth, remnants of the recent rains. Inside the grand yet somber mansion, an air of palpable tension enveloped the rooms, as if the very walls were mourning the man whose spirit had once filled them with life. William Wirt Winchester lay in his ornate bedroom, the once vibrant space now cloaked in an oppressive gloom. The heavy drapes, drawn tight against the outside world, filtered the light, casting a muted glow over the sorrowful faces of those gathered around the bed. His wife, Sarah, stood at the foot of the bed, her heart heavy with grief. The sound of her husband's labored breathing filled the silence, a haunting reminder of the encroaching shadow of death. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked steadily, each second echoing like a distant reminder of time's relentless march. It was a cruel irony that William had dedicated his life to the invention of a firearm that had altered the course of American history, yet now he lay powerless against the inevitable. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company had prospered under his stewardship, revolutionizing the way men hunted and fought, yet the wealth and success amassed could not stave off the creeping specter of mortality. As the minutes crawled by, Sarah's mind raced with memories of their life together. The laughter shared over candlelit dinners, the dreams discussed under the stars, and the hopes dashed by fate. In her heart, she knew that the man she loved, the man who had been her partner in both triumph and tribulation, was slipping away from her grasp. The weight of her sorrow pressed upon her, a tangible force that made it difficult to breathe. "William," she whispered, her voice trembling, "stay with me, please." Her plea was met with silence, save for the soft rattle of his breath. The pain of impending loss twisted within her, sharp and consuming, as she grasped his hand tightly, willing some spark of life to return. In the corner of the room, Dr. Lyman, the family's physician, observed with a furrowed brow. He had witnessed countless deaths in his years of practice, yet the sight of his friend in such a state brought a pang of sorrow to his heart. The man who had transformed the landscape of the American West through his inventions now lay frail and fading, a stark reminder of life's fragility. As dusk descended, the room darkened further, the shadows lengthening and coiling around the figures within. Outside, the chirping of crickets filled the air, providing a stark contrast to the stillness inside. A sudden gust rattled the windows, and Sarah felt an icy chill creep up her spine. She had heard the old tales of spirits wandering the earth, restless and seeking solace. The very foundation of the family home had been built upon the belief that the souls of the wronged would haunt the living, demanding reparation for past injustices. With a final shuddering breath, William's eyes fluttered closed, the warmth that had once radiated from him extinguished. A profound silence settled over the room, heavy and thick, as if the world itself held its breath. Sarah fell to her knees, her heart shattered, the weight of her grief echoing in the stillness. The mansion, once a home filled with laughter and love, now felt like a tomb, a place where the past and present collided, leaving only shadows and memories to linger in the fading light. The sun hung low in the California sky, casting an orange hue over the sprawling estate of the Latham family. The mansion, a sprawling edifice of whitewashed clapboard and intricate gingerbread trim, stood as a monument to prosperity, yet within its walls, silence reigned, heavy as a shroud. Sarah Latham, clad in a black mourning dress that clung to her frail form like a second skin, sat in the parlor, her gaze fixed on the ornate fireplace, now cold and lifeless. The warmth of her husband's laughter and the sweet cries of their infant daughter Clara seemed like echoes from a distant past, drowned in the sea of sorrow that had engulfed her life. The house felt vast and empty, the once vibrant rooms, now mere chambers of loss. The air was thick with the scent of dried roses, remnants of a funeral arrangement that had wilted, much like her spirit. Just weeks before, the flowers had been a symbol of hope, a final farewell to her daughter, taken too soon by the cruel hand of illness. Now they were a reminder of the fragility of life, a lesson Sarah had learned all too well. As the clock ticked softly in the corner, its rhythmic sound was a stark reminder of time's relentless march. It had been mere weeks since Clara's passing, yet the ink of grief had darkened further with the death of her husband, Edward. Tuberculosis had claimed him, a slow suffocation that had robbed him of his vitality, leaving behind a specter of what had once been a robust man, full of dreams and laughter. The doctor's words echoed in her mind, "There is nothing more we can do." Those words had sealed her fate, casting her into an abyss from which there seemed no return. With Edward gone, the vast fortune he had amassed now rested uneasily in her hands. The sprawling vineyards, the orchards heavy with fruit, and the investments in burgeoning enterprises in San Francisco were all hers. Yet wealth felt like an anchor, dragging her deeper into despair. Friends and family, once a comforting presence, now seemed like distant stars, their lights dimmed by her ever-encroaching darkness. Invitations to gatherings faded, whispers of pity followed her through the town, leaving her isolated in her grief. Sarah's isolation became a cocoon, wrapping her in layers of sorrow. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the seasons shifting outside as she remained ensconced in her own world. The vibrant California sun shone down upon her estate, but she found herself retreating further into the shadows of the mansion. The once bustling household staff moved about with hushed footsteps, their laughter stifled, their joy extinguished in her presence. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Sarah found herself wandering through the overgrown gardens. The flowers, once tended with care, now flaunted their wildness as nature reclaimed its domain. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, a bittersweet reminder of life's persistence even in the face of death. She knelt by a patch of daisies, their cheerful faces a mockery of her own desolation. In that moment, the walls of her isolation began to close in, a suffocating embrace that threatened to crush her spirit. With each passing day, she felt herself becoming a specter, a ghost haunting the halls of her own life. Grief was a relentless tide, and as its waves crashed against her heart, she wondered whether she would ever find the strength to emerge from the depths of her sorrow, or if she was destined to remain a prisoner of her own making, lost amidst the echoes of lost love. In the year of our Lord 1884, the sun cast its warm embrace over the rolling hills of San Jose, California, illuminating the ambitious frame of a sprawling mansion that would soon become the talk of the nation, the Winchester Mystery House. Its creator, Sarah Winchester, widow of the famed firearms magnate William Wirt Winchester, was a woman driven by a profound grief that had settled heavily upon her heart. Having lost her husband and only child to illness, the specter of death loomed large in her life, igniting a desperate need to appease the restless spirits she believed haunted her. As the autumn leaves began to scatter, the rhythmic sound of hammering echoed across the property, mingling with the distant calls of the local birds. Carpenter and laborer alike bent to their tasks under Sarah's watchful eye. She was a petite woman, clad in black attire that reflected her sorrow, yet her presence commanded respect. Her voice, though soft, held an intensity that compelled her workers to labor tirelessly, day by day, under the unforgiving Californian sun. "Build, and build more," she would insist, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "This house must never cease its growth." The spirits demand it. The blueprints, if they could be called such, were as enigmatic as the woman herself. With no clear direction, each room seemed to sprout from the last, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. Stairs ascended to nowhere, doors opened into blank walls, and windows overlooked nothing but the sky. Workers often exchanged bewildered glances, whispering amongst themselves of the woman's peculiar obsession. Tales of the supernatural, of spirits who could not find peace, began to weave their way through the community, casting a shadow over her labor. As the structure grew, so did the air of mystery surrounding it. The townsfolk spoke of strange occurrences, flickering lights in the dead of night, the sound of footsteps echoing through empty halls, and the feeling of being watched. Sarah, however, remained undeterred, convinced that her tireless efforts would pacify the tormented souls of those claimed by the Winchester rifles. She believed that each nail driven into the wood brought her closer to an elusive salvation. By 1886, the house had ballooned into a labyrinth of over 160 rooms, each a testament to Sarah's relentless pursuit of solace. Elaborate stained glass windows filled the interior with a kaleidoscope of colors, yet the atmosphere remained thick with an eerie tension. The local press began to take notice. Stories of the mansion's construction and its reclusive owner began to pique the interest of the curious and the morbidly inclined. As whispers of the Winchester Mystery House spread, visitors began to arrive, drawn by the allure of the unknown. They gazed in awe at the architectural oddities, yet a chill would often run down their spines as they ventured through the seemingly endless hallways. Some claimed to feel the presence of unseen watchers, while others reported hearing soft sobs echoing in the night. In those quiet hours, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows danced upon the walls, Sarah would often sit alone, surrounded by the fruits of her labor. The house, with all its bizarre twists and turns, became a sanctuary of sorts, a monument to her late husband and child, and a prison of her sorrow. Each nail hammered and each room constructed was a step deeper into a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead began to blur, and the echoes of the past resonated profoundly within the walls of the Winchester Mystery House. The year was 1914, and the air in San Jose, California, was thick with the scent of orange blossoms mingling with dust. Beneath the vibrant blue sky, Sarah Winchester stood amid the sprawling hills, her mind a tempest of grief and resolve. After the death of her beloved husband and the untimely passing of her only child, she sought solace in the Golden State, hoping to escape the shadows that clung to her. In her heart, however, she felt a compulsion to atone for the afflictions wrought by the very rifles that had made her family fortune. The expanse of land she acquired was a canvas upon which her sorrow could take shape. She envisioned a mansion, not merely a home, but a sanctuary, a place where spirits could roam free, where the echo of her loved ones might find peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over her property, the rhythmic sound of hammers and saws filled the air, a symphony of creation that belied the chaos within her. Construction began in earnest, with workers arriving each day to lay the foundation of her peculiar dream. Sarah's orders were often perplexing. "Build the staircase there," she would instruct, pointing to a spot that seemed arbitrary to the laborers, "and make it lead to nowhere." The men exchanged glances, their brows knitted in confusion. Yet her unwavering gaze silenced their murmurs. They had heard the whispers of the townsfolk, tales of the Winchester widow whose sorrow had twisted her reason. But the coin she offered was as solid as the wood they shaped. As the days turned to weeks, the mansion began to rise, a sprawling labyrinth of rooms and hallways that defied logic. There were doors that opened to blank walls, windows overlooking the sky where no ground met the eye, and corridors that twisted back on themselves like the labyrinthine workings of a troubled mind. Each architectural oddity was a tribute to the lost souls, a gesture of her desperate need to appease the spirits of those who had perished at the hands of her family's weapons. One evening, as the sun surrendered to twilight, Sarah stood on the balcony, gazing down at the construction site. The clamor of tools fell silent, and an eerie stillness wrapped around her like a shroud. She felt the weight of the souls she had yet to honor pressing down on her, and a chill ran through her. With each passing day, the mansion grew, but so did her sense of urgency. her belief that the walls of this grand edifice must be built before time ran out. The townspeople watched with a mix of curiosity and pity. They spoke of Sarah Winchester in hushed tones, some claiming she was a madwoman, others a visionary. Children dared each other to venture near the mansion, sharing tales of ghosts that danced in the moonlight, of whispers echoing through the empty halls. But to Sarah, each creak of the timber was a reminder of the spirits she sought to honor, and each gust of wind through the partially constructed frames was a sigh of relief, a fleeting moment of connection to the lost. As the foundation of the mansion deepened and the architecture twisted in on itself, the air thickened with both anticipation and dread. Sarah had become ensnared in her own creation, a project that seemed to promise solace, but instead wove her deeper into the tapestry of loss. In the heart of her efforts, she felt a flicker of hope, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, this grand endeavor could bridge the chasm between the living and the dead, a final act of love for those she had lost. In the crisp dawn of a California morning in 1890, the sun began to illuminate the rugged landscape of the Sierra Nevada foothills, casting long shadows over the bustling town of Grass Valley. A palpable excitement filled the air as the clang of iron and the shouts of laborers echoed through the streets. A monumental transformation was underway, one that would reshape the very fabric of the region. The first major expansion of the Central Pacific Railroad was in full swing, a marvel of engineering that promised to connect the isolated mining towns with the burgeoning cities of the West. Men, clad in dusty work clothes and broad-brimmed hats, toiled with fervor to lay tracks that gleamed like silver ribbons against a backdrop of towering pines. The rhythmic thud of pickaxes striking granite reverberated through the canyons, a testament to human determination in the face of nature's formidable barriers. As the townsfolk gathered, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension, they exchanged stories of prosperity and the specter of change that loomed over their lives. Farmers and miners alike debated the implications of the railroad's arrival. For some, it heralded an era of opportunity, the promise of easier access to markets and the influx of eager travelers. For others, it represented a threat to their way of life, a harbinger of industrial encroachment that might swallow their quaint communities whole. Among the crowd stood William McAllister, a local merchant with a keen eye for opportunity. He had watched the mining boom swell over the past decade, and now his heart raced at the thought of the railroad facilitating trade. He envisioned his store, filled with goods from distant lands, flourishing under the weight of new customers drawn by the rhythmic whistle of trains arriving from the east. Yet, lurking beneath his excitement was the dread of monopolies forming, as larger enterprises threatened to overshadow the small business owners like himself. As the day wore on, the sound of progress echoed louder. The steam engines arrived, their iron bodies glistening in the sunlight, belching smoke that mingled with the scent of pine. The first train rolled into the station with a triumphant blast of its horn, drawing gasps from the onlookers. Children squealed with delight as they raced to catch a glimpse of the massive locomotive, while elders exchanged wary glances, recognizing the change that was now inescapable. Yet, amid the celebration, there was an undercurrent of tension. The indigenous tribes, well aware of their ancestral lands being encroached upon, gathered in quiet resilience. They watched the tracks snake through the hills, feeling the weight of history shift beneath their feet. Their leaders spoke of preserving their way of life, of resisting the tide that threatened to wash away generations of culture and tradition. Whispers of conflict began to emerge, a stark reminder that progress came with a cost. As evening fell, the sky blazed with hues of orange and purple, casting a surreal glow over the town. Lanterns flickered to life, illuminating the faces of the townsfolk as they recounted the day's events, their voices a mixture of hope and wariness. The railroad had arrived, and with it, a new chapter began, one marked by the promise of prosperity, yet shadowed by the uncertainties of a changing world. The tracks, newly laid and gleaming, symbolized a crossroads, a journey into the unknown that would forever alter the landscape of California. As dawn broke over the sprawling hills of California in the summer of 1914, the once quiet estate of Sarah Winchester teemed with activity. The air was thick with the sound of hammers striking nails and saws gnawing through timber, a discordant symphony that echoed through the valley. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced through the open windows of the mansion, which had already become notorious for its peculiar architecture and whispered tales of the supernatural. Now, with her ambitious expansion plans set in motion, the estate was embarking on a transformation that would defy the laws of conventional design. Sarah, a woman haunted by the specters of her past, stood firmly at the heart of the turmoil. Her dark eyes, framed by weary shadows, glinted with a fervor that had become almost obsessive. The death of her husband, William, and the tragic loss of her infant daughter had left her steeped in grief, compelling her to seek solace in the unknown. It was said that Sarah believed the spirits of those slain by the Winchester rifle, the very weapon that had brought her fortune, tormented her. In response, she vowed to construct a sanctuary for herself, one that would confuse the spirits and provide her solace from their relentless presence. As she surveyed the chaos unfolding around her, teams of laborers toiled day and night, their faces set in grim determination. Carpenters, masons, and laborers worked tirelessly, their hands calloused from relentless labor. They erected walls that twisted and turned, creating a veritable labyrinth where staircases led to nowhere and doors opened into blank walls. The mansion began to resemble a grotesque puzzle, each piece an effort to thwart the restless spirits that Sarah believed lurked in the shadows. Bricks and timber piled high, the mansion seemed to breathe, expanding its chest with each new addition. Towering turrets reached toward the sky, while gabled roofs jutted at odd angles, casting long shadows on the ground below. Lanterns flickered, their light struggling against the encroaching darkness, as if echoing the uncertainty that enveloped Sarah. The construction site buzzed with an undercurrent of tension. Whispers among the workers spoke of strange occurrences, tools going missing, shadows flitting just beyond the periphery of their vision, and the sensation of being watched. As the weeks turned into months, the structure grew more intricate, adorned with ornate carvings and stained glass that caught the sunlight in a kaleidoscope of colors. Yet, while the mansion flourished, Sarah's demeanor became increasingly fraught with anxiety. She frequently ventured into the newly built sections, arms wrapped around her waist, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood as if seeking reassurance from the very materials that encased her fears. At night, the mansion took on a life of its own. The creaking of floorboards and the sighing of wind through the eaves melded into a haunting melody, a lullaby for the restless spirits. Sarah would often sit by the window, watching the stars flicker above like distant lanterns, her mind racing with thoughts of the ghosts she sought to appease. Each stroke of the builder's hammer, each new room, was a prayer offered to the unknown, a desperate bid for peace in a life suffocated by sorrow. As the expansion neared completion, the mansion had transformed into an enigma, a testament to Sarah's fervent desire to outsmart the unseen forces she believed hunted her. The labyrinthine corridors, once a mere architectural whim, now stood as a somber reflection of her psyche, twisted and complex, forever haunted by the echoes of the past. The ground shuddered violently beneath the feet of San Francisco's bustling populace on the morning of April 18, 1906. At precisely 5:12 a.m., the earth unleashed its furious wrath, sending tremors that rippled through the city like the frantic beating of a giant heart. Buildings, many of them still adorned with the Victorian elegance of a burgeoning metropolis, quaked and groaned, their wooden and brick structures creaking ominously. With a thunderous roar, a series of powerful shocks struck. The sound was a cacophony of destruction. Glass shattered, the timbers of homes splintered, and the groans of the earth echoed through the streets. In the blink of an eye, the grand hotels and charming shops that lined Market Street were reduced to mere piles of rubble, their once proud facades crumbling into dust. Streets buckled, creating fissures that ran deep, while streetcars swayed precariously, their metal frames twisting under the strain of the violent upheaval. In the immediate aftermath, panic gripped the city. Citizens poured into the streets, their faces pale with shock and disbelief. Mothers clutched their children, while men rushed to help their neighbors, instinctively banding together in the face of calamity. The air was thick with dust, a choking haze that stung the eyes and filled the lungs. Fire alarms blared, mingling with the cries of the frightened and the injured as the first flames ignited amidst the ruins. Within hours, the very earth that had wrought destruction began to conspire against the survivors. Fires erupted across the city, fanned by strong winds that swept through the streets like a malevolent specter. The conflagration spread with a merciless ferocity, devouring everything in its path: homes, businesses, and even the very memories held within their walls. The sun, obscured by smoke, cast an eerie pall over the city, transforming it into a hellscape of orange and black. As the hours turned into days, the plight of the citizens worsened. Thousands found themselves homeless, displaced by the dual calamities of earthquake and fire. Makeshift camps sprang up in parks and open fields, where tents fashioned from salvage materials were pitched in a desperate attempt for shelter. The atmosphere was thick with despair and loss, yet a resilient spirit flickered in the hearts of the survivors. Relief efforts began to pour into the city from neighboring communities and beyond. As the enormity of the disaster reached far and wide, volunteers, driven by compassion and urgency, distributed food, water, and medical aid to the beleaguered populace. The Red Cross mobilized, their emblem a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Yet, amid the struggle for survival, a darker tension emerged. With law enforcement stretched thin and the city in disarray, looting became rampant. Desperation bred criminality, and the streets that once echoed with the laughter of children were now fraught with danger. Citizens banded together, forming vigilante groups to protect their neighborhoods, underscoring the fragile line between order and chaos in the face of overwhelming disaster. As the days turned into weeks, San Francisco began the arduous journey of recovery. The spirit of its people, tested yet unbroken, would rise from the ashes of devastation. The city, once a jewel of the West, stood at a crossroads, determined to rebuild, restore, and reclaim its place in the sun. The San Francisco earthquake of 1906 would forever be etched in memory, a testament to both the fragility of human existence and the indomitable will to persevere. The ground trembled violently beneath the sprawling hills of San Jose on that fateful morning of April 18, 1906. The earth, long a placid companion to the industrious townsfolk, unleashed its wrath in a cacophony of thunderous roars and grinding stone. The air, thick with dust and the acrid scent of splintering wood, was pierced by the anguished cries of the city's inhabitants. As buildings collapsed like houses of cards under the relentless force of the quake. Among the many structures that bore the brunt of nature's fury was the Winchester Mystery House, a labyrinthine mansion dedicated to the memory of Sarah Winchester's late husband, William Wirt Winchester. The once proud edifice, with its sprawling gardens and peculiar architecture, had become a sanctuary of solace for Sarah, who believed that the spirits of those who fell to Winchester rifles sought her out for redemption. Yet on this day, the spirits were not the only forces at play. As the tremors subsided, the mansion stood in perilous disrepair. The ornate turrets, which seemed to reach for the heavens, now sagged ominously under the weight of shattered dreams. Windows once glimmering in the California sun were now shattered remnants that littered the ground, twinkling like scattered stars upon the earth. The grand ballroom, where laughter had once mingled with the strains of a piano, lay awash in dust and debris, its once polished floors now marred by the chaos. Sarah, a woman of indomitable spirit and profound belief in the supernatural, stood amidst the wreckage, her heart pounding with both dread and an inexplicable exhilaration. The echoes of the quake still resounded in her ears. Yet within her, a different sound began to form, the murmurs of the spirits. To her, the devastation was not merely a calamity. It was a message, a divine nudge urging her to continue the construction of her beloved mansion. With fierce determination, she began to survey the damage, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering light of the few remaining candles that illuminated the gloom. Each crack in the wall, each fallen beam, seemed to speak to her in a language only she could understand. The spirits were restless, and her purpose was clear. The house must rise again, and with it, the souls trapped within its walls. As workmen, summoned from the nearby towns, arrived, Sarah wasted no time in directing their efforts. She moved among them, her voice steady and commanding, despite the ominous shadows that danced around the dilapidated halls. The crew, though initially hesitant, soon found themselves swept up in her fervor. They set to work with renewed vigor, clearing rubble, reinforcing foundations, and restoring the mansion's unique features, all while listening to Sarah's impassioned tales of the spirits that guided her. Days turned to weeks as the work progressed, each nail hammered into wood a defiance against fate. The mansion, though scarred, began to breathe once more, its walls whispering secrets of resilience. But for Sarah, the task was more than mere construction. It was a communion with the otherworldly. She often stood alone in the moonlight, speaking to the spirits, her words carried off by the gentle breeze, believing that each spoken syllable fortified the very essence of the house. Yet the shadows of doubt lingered. Would the spirits approve of her vision? Would they embrace the continuation of their ethereal abode? As Sarah gazed upon the skeletal remains of her once grand home, determination mingled with uncertainty, the tension palpable in the air. In that moment, the Winchester Mystery House became a symbol of hope entwined with despair, a testament to a woman's unwavering belief in the unseen, even in the face of nature's devastating blows.